So we are talking about mental toughness and how that can be incorporated to achieving fitness goals. A lot of people struggle from the mental side of things in terms of being able to stick for stuff, being able to stick for stuff to the long term, and using these kind of the mental side of things we want to dive into here. So again, as always, people asking why is Ross wearing sunglasses? It's sunny in Dubai. Jeez. So we'll cover that later. And he just wants to look like the Falcon from the Marvel films. So if anyone wants to ask any questions live about mental side of things, whether it's dieting or exercise performance that they want to throw into the mix here, you can absolutely 100% do that. To kick things off, though, we are going to go to Tim. And I know he has some specific experience around this whole sort of topic. So we're going to come to him to ask him to define mental toughness in the context of fitness. So we're kind of clear about what we're actually talking about right here. Over to you, my friend. You have the floor.
Cool. So first and foremost, Ross, I've actually just ordered some of those glasses because I know they're good for you. So everyone who's hating, they just don't know. But yeah, that's really cool.
Luckily, they collect the hairs as well, which is great.
Hi, Nick. Right, so mental toughness is actually a term used in sports psychology. I studied sports psychology at an undergraduate level. It's been a vested interest of mine. I'm not a sports psychologist. I'm not a psychologist. So I'm just going to kind of talk about what it is within the context of what it is, which is in sports performance. And then I'm going to use that information to talk a little bit about how that is very representative of the fitness industry. And I know Flo's going to chime in and really kind of relate it to her personal experiences from her background as well. So mental toughness as defined, well, it's got multiple definitions. I've got one here, is having the natural or developed psychological edge that enables you to generally cope better than your opponents with many demands, such as competition, training, and lifestyle, that the sport places on the performer, and specifically be more consistent and better than your opponents in remaining determined, focused, confident, and control under pressure. Now, a lot of those keywords can resonate with a lot of people who buckle under pressure or lack confidence or find that they can't become focused. And we're probably going to touch a lot about all these different words over the course of the next 4 hours, however long this talk is going to go on for. So I just wanted to kind of start specifically with an area of confidence. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a model and use that in the sports psychology context, and then talk a little bit about how it can be related to fitness and what it can do. And I do think it's actually going to summarize a lot of the things that have already been mentioned over the past couple of days. So the biggest source of confidence is previous victory. So previous experience in doing something well. So if we want to get somebody to do something, we need to try and replicate what that might be, whether it's in a sporting setting or it's a nutrition setting. So if you've had a good breakfast that you liked and it helped you feel better throughout the day, then you're positively rewarded to do the same thing again. So the model I'm gonna talk about, it talks about the perceived importance of the task, the perceived demands of the task, and the resources that are available. So when we talk about the perceived importance, in terms of competition, we need to look at how important is the competition, and sometimes that can create arousal issues. So if we become overstimulated, this can impair our performance. But in terms of from a nutritional or a health point of view, like, is the task that you have set too challenging for you? And is it going to be one of those things that I'm sure will resonate with a lot of people? If I create this perfect diet and I don't quite hit it, or it's too challenging, do I just go, well, sorry, I'm going to have pork pies for dinner? And is there a way that we can make those tasks easier? So the competition or the outcome of what we're trying to achieve, can we make that easier for us to adhere to, and our perception of that task to be easier? When it comes to the task demands, we look at the technical elements of the skill. So let's look at an MMA from a perspective, because I know I'm quite into mixed martial arts. I know you are as well, Simon. There's huge amounts of motor control and loads of technicalities within fighting that can be overstimulate you. So what a lot of some of the best fighters will say is that they didn't go in with a game plan. They just wanted to do the task. I'm just going to get into the cage and then see whatever plays in front of me. And this can help somebody's arousal and subsequently improve their performance and their resilience within the fight. Similar to if you're translating that to nutrition, if you're, I don't know, there's some kind of crisis, like, I don't know, hypothetically speaking, some kind of virus that's going around and messing with everybody's structure. Instead of going, oh, well, I'm going to look at the technicalities of the tasks, that I need to have 134 grams of protein and have this many protein servings, what we can just do to help trigger these kind of behaviors can go, I'm just going to simplify the task and just go, I'm just going to eat food at this time and this time. And then hope that everything, that kind of trigger will help do more things in the future. If that makes sense. So instead of making something super complicated, we're really narrowing it down. And then it comes down to resourcefulness as well. Like having a little bit of prior planning of what do I actually have available to me, and being able to forward plan that will reduce the stresses and will also help you become more tough in times of adversity. So to kind of summarize, mental toughness is obviously multifaceted, but there are things that we can do to implement strategies to make us have a plan B, or make a task a little bit easier to help us deal with that a little bit better and thus perform better and thus live a healthier lifestyle and thus eat better as well. Does that make sense? I've waffled on quite a lot.
Perfect.
So basically, make things easier instead of making things so hard for ourselves. And having a plan B is one of the best things that I'd recommend to somebody. So we, as people, we don't like uncertainty. We like to know what's going on. And that uncertainty leads to extra stress, and it can impair our performance, impair our eating habits, behaviors, and all these kind of things. So what we have to try and plan as best we can is control what we can control. And if we believe the task is too hard or too aroused, we can try our best to implement strategies to make it as simpler as possible, to therefore improve our ability to experience it positively, which will then improve our confidence, which will then create this kind of snowballing effect of better behavioral habits.
Got it. Very comprehensive. Very comprehensive.
Kind of.
I like it. Cool. So
you
deserve a drink. So we'll come to Ross next and kind of build on that with, in terms of your opinion, like what are the main limitations that might hold someone back from fostering or developing a strong mindset in terms of their fitness goals that they're trying to achieve? What's potentially the drawback that it's preventing them from moving forward with that? Oh, Ross, you're on mute, my old fella.
And back in the game.
There you go.
There you go. So just to add to Tim's points, because I actually, after this, went away and did a bit of research, because after our discussion on Zoom, it was really interesting actually to go into this. It's been a long time since I looked at sports psychology, and one of the definitions that came up pretty much said there's no such thing, categorically no such thing as toughness or mental toughness, which is quite an interesting concept, right, given that this talk is all about mental toughness. But I think what it is that it's a group of behaviors and ways of being that have essentially been grouped into this one label, right? And so they list here, I mean, it's a plethora of different traits, but you think of things like purposefulness, discipline, initiative, self-control, confidence, resolve, resilience. These are all things that we know of that are, and to a degree, somewhat quantifiable, and we can develop and kind of become better at applying those type of concepts. So I think when we start to think of almost like behavioral traits rather than just this fixed idea of mental toughness, it gives us a bit more room and flexibility to go after improving things that might be a resourceful trait to essentially adopt and work on, getting better at. And of course, I think, like Tim will probably mention later, it's not anything that happens overnight. It's something you have to work really damn hard at. So I thought that would just be a cool add-on to what you were saying, Tim, is people sometimes, they break it down into something that's a bit more an easier concept to understand. It can make it much easier to then chase after it. In terms of limitations, I think this might go a little bit deeper woo, depending on what how far you go into things like spirituality and being in touch with things like energy and emotions and feelings and all that stuff. But I think we have a big issue in society now where there's almost this idea of you can't show vulnerability, you can't show weakness, you have to be perceived to be at your best all the time. And I think so by almost having to hold yourself up to that sort of social standard, that in of itself can make it pretty damn difficult or pretty numbing for some people to even try and be what could be perceived as mentally tough. And of course that will vary depending on the culture, the family you're brought up in, many traits that factor into it. So I think understanding when it comes to all these ideas of, like, say, toughness, it's also important to understand also what all of the other end of the spectrum of emotions and feelings feel like. So if you can be tough, you should also be allowed to be able to show signs of weakness at times and be able to understand why that's occurring. And then, okay, well, am I weak in this situation and it's resourceful for me to be weak in this situation, or is this something that I need to actively work on and improve on? But without experiencing what that failure feels like, how the hell are you meant to know what improvement or better looks like, or what, if you're not being as, tough, or you're not as far along in a particular trait that you want to be better at, then if you don't fail at maybe doing that or not quite getting to the standard you try to set for yourself, how do you know what, you have to have a marker to start from, essentially is what I'm saying. And so I think I always really like the phrase of don't be afraid to fail often and fail early, because the more often you kind of hit those points, think about what we do in training. It's the easiest way I always describe to people. If you are taking a set to failure, the idea is that you try and fail multiple times in order to adapt and then get strong and come back and do a better job the next time. And I don't think this is that much different. Probably the second point to touch on is self-identity. So there's a really good book I'd recommend people to go and read. Have I got it here? Yes, I do. I'm not disappearing. Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. So I'm going to keep it there so people can, and it's out on the screen. There we go. But it's a really, really good book as far as understanding the importance that self-identity plays in how we turn up and show up in certain situations. So, I think, Tim, you've touched on this when we last spoke, was the idea that if you look at a lot of professional athletes, they have a certain identity of, I am the pro, experienced, skills athlete. And so that becomes their identity. Of course, that can become a problem when they no longer can do that sport and the whole identity is wrapped up in being that person. And then all of a sudden, they're no longer a professional athlete and they have to go and find something new to do. But in the context of what makes them a great athlete, there's many athletes that are not necessarily any more talented, any more skilled. It's just that their level of confidence to perform consistently week in, week out is just a lot higher than potentially someone else who actually might be fitter, might be stronger, might have more God-given talent, but they just haven't got that same level of mental resilience and kind of confidence in their abilities. So I think self-identity is a huge one, and we see it a lot in, if coaches working with clients, someone might go from 100 kilos down to 70 kilos, and they get to 70 kilos, and then they start sabotaging their way back up towards that 100 again. And why does that happen? And often it's because they still identify as that 100 kilo individual, because maybe they've taken a method towards fat loss that was maybe a little bit aggressive, or it didn't align with their values as an individual. And so they've done it to maybe please others, or they've done it in a way that's a bit unstructured or uneducated. And so they end up not feeling that the rate of the physical change doesn't match the rate of the psychological change that goes with it. And so identity doesn't shift with the physical, and that can be a big problem. So I think trying to take a bit of time to understand who you are as a person, what are your values and what aligns with those values, that will make a huge difference. And then once you start to understand yourself better, you can start to define for yourself what mental toughness is for you and where you need that to show up in your life at different situations. And then I guess the big thing that many have actually touched on throughout these 2 days, so I won't go into it in too much detail, but I guess it's just how you perceive things. We don't have sometimes a choice of things that are going to happen. None of us had a choice about this whole COVID-19 thing happening. None of us had a choice about the government's imposing lockdowns or rules or sanctions. In Dubai today, they just announced that you cannot leave your home. It's a 24-hour sanitization for 2 weeks. So it's been pretty, and it's just literally, it's an overnight thing. They lay down the message, and that's you. If you go outside, you're fined like 5,000 dirhams, so about £1,000 roughly. If you do this and that, they give this big sanction of fines. Now, I have clients who are so stressed out about things they cannot control because they've not taken a moment to just take stock and perception of the situation. Their perception of the situation could be incredibly different to someone who actually has very similar circumstances, but the only difference between those two individuals is that one has seen it as, well, I perceive this as an opportunity to, you know, learn from this and do other things. And the reality is this whole corona thing could just be a trial run for the next major disease or outbreak. That's the way I'm kind of looking at it. So actually, if anything, this is a practice run for what potentially could be next, right? But then on a more positive point, for me, I know it's been an opportunity for me to work on projects that I've maybe been putting off for a long time. And so there's always a way to flip things to be way more favorable. So maybe just taking a bit of time to look at, is the current perspective you have of the current situation you're in, whether it's this whole COVID thing or when we get past the other side of this, whether it's to do with work, your relationships, your training, is your current perspective serving you, or is it debilitating you? And if something's not serving you, then find a way to shift it to a place where that perspective is a positively serving perspective.
Ross has all scared us with COVID-19 part 2 before part 1 is over.
One thing I would add slightly. Sorry. Just at the beginning of what Ross said about kind of the fear of failure thing, I think part of understanding that is also understanding failing and being okay with failing. I think it's kind of not a great word to use, but being okay with it and being able to pick yourself back up and be like, okay, that didn't work out, but I'm going to start. That shows kind of, that is strength and like toughness in itself. So I think the idea of kind of failure is quite a limiting thing for a lot of people, but actually being able to be knocked down and get back up and work and keep working hard and not be put off, that is a huge component of this kind of this resilience that we're talking about. So I think that some of that comes with kind of self-compassion about going, okay, actually, you know, I didn't fail because I'm a bad person or because I'm just awful and it's never going to get better. That didn't work and I need to switch view and I'm going to try this now. So I think kind of trying to combat that is a really, really important thing.
So I'm just going to point out, and this can go kind of either way, and there's definitely arguments for and against. When I used to teach about mental toughness a long time ago, longer than I would care to admit, there was a model called the need to avoid failure, the need to avoid failure and the need to achieve, and these were on two different spectrums. And we used to talk about, is your drive to not fail or is your drive to succeed? And it was kind of argued that those who had the drive to succeed and didn't think about failure were those who actually performed better in difficult situations. And the case study that we always used to use for this particular model was Lewis Hamilton, and there was lots of different clips that we collated. And he used to always, so the traits about Lewis Hamilton is very similar to what Ross said, is that he used to have a really strong identity of himself. He knew exactly who he was. He knew exactly what his job was to do. And he always took responsibility for everything, even if it was out of his control. So there was a time where he lost and it had nothing to do with him. And he was like, completely my fault. This person performed better. I know what I need to do. Here's what my job is. Here's where I went wrong. Here's what I'm going to do to get better. And it was like, this is somebody who is mentally tough. He's very resilient because he's, again, going off what Flo said, he has failed, but he's learned from it, and then he's going to bounce back and become stronger. And he's now this was like 7-8 years ago, he's now one of the best drivers in the world. So just an interesting concept about what is your desire? Is your desire to succeed or is your desire to avoid failure? And again, both sides of that spectrum are transient. There's no right or wrong. There's no, well, I want to be this type, but it's just an interesting concept to think about of with regards to success and failure. And this can be applied to your nutrition, to your health, to your training. Are you failing or succeeding? And what is more beneficial for you and your individual preferences?
Can I add to that as well, Simon, quickly before we move on? It'll be super short, I promise. It's just this idea that, like you said, if you're such a strong identity about who you are, then when you fail, it's not an assault on who you are as a person or your character. And I think often you see this a lot with clients, if they maybe have a bad meal, they mess up, whatever else, it's kind of as if they take it as, oh, I'm going to really disappoint my coach, or I'm just such a failure. And they almost like, it's like a personal attack on themselves. Like, well, so the question I'll sometimes ask clients, I'll say, well, tell me this, are you a good wife or husband? Are you a good daughter? Are you a good brother? Are you a good friend? Are you good at your job? Yeah. It's like, so how does this define you as a person then? Then next, like, hell no, I'm not good at my job.
I'm none of the above.
But yeah, so yeah, if you wear any of those things, then surely that it's just a case that this is just one event. It doesn't define who you are as a person. It doesn't detract from your character. And so I think, like you said, people who are able to move quite, even if they're chasing success and they do fail, they don't dwell on it because it's not who they are. They don't identify as that. So I think that's quite important for people to maybe have a think about. It's not saying that you're a bad person because you had a bad meal or because you went off plan. It's just it's an event that you can learn from and move forward. And that's it.
Cool. Awesome. So I want to bring in some live questions as we go. So we'll do that right now. Maybe Flo, we'll kind of start with you on the live question. What would be your daily rituals that improve your ability to stress manage? And I'm just going to disappear for a second.
So this is an interesting one. So I would say I'm a relatively highly strung person. So I think I do tend to get quite stressed, and I do tend to have tended to get anxious before. And I do now have kind of a set of things that I do to try and manage that. And a lot of them have been about something that we were kind of going to touch on a little bit, about a little bit more kind of self-compassion. And actually I saw the talk just before this with Lewis and Christy and Emilia, and they were talking a lot about being kinder to yourself and being compassionate. And I thought that was interesting because I think it leads into this. I think stress can often come not just from external factors, but how you are internally dealing with those and how you kind of perceive yourself within those situations. So I think different things are going to work for different people. And these are things that I've kind of developed over a couple of years. So they're not necessarily going to be for you. But I think, so kindness, kind of being more kind to myself, and that kind of can include looking back at my day and thinking, okay, what did I achieve today? Rather than thinking, oh God, what have I got to do? What's the next thing on the list? Or always feeling behind. I kind of find it helpful to look back at my day and think, actually, what did I achieve today? I achieved these things. And for me, that kind of lowers my levels of stress. I mean, exercise is a big one. Feeling like I've got control over my nutrition and my training in a kind of very balanced way. It's such a wide question, but for me, it's about time to myself, kindness, and kind of as much balance. I know that's a bit of a buzzword in the fitness industry, but as much balance in the way that the kind of balance I want within my life. So that kind of would be my top tips, but that has to be, it's a very personal thing to get there, and what your life will look like will be very different to what my life will look like in order for you to be able to manage your stress. So that would be my answer to that question.
Nice.
We've lost Simon though, so
I'll go from here because I don't. And to be fair, I'm probably the wrong person to answer this question because I don't really have any stress or worries. Like, I'm Australian, so everything is no worries. If I was African, it would be Hakuna Matata. Like, I literally don't worry about anything. Like, what is the worst that can happen from any situation? And it's probably never that bad in my mind. Like, it's all perspective. I think someone said it before. Perspective is, Ross, you said it before. Perspective is a huge thing. And when you actually think about a situation, and there's a graphic that I like to send my friends whenever they're complaining about something they can't control. And it's, is there something you can do about it? Yes or no? And basically it's like this little chart, and it all ends up, don't worry about it. Because if you can do something about it, then do it and stop worrying about it. If you can't do something about it, then stop worrying about it. Like, it's better explained by the graphic than by my mouth, but it is definitely it calms down a lot of my friends, and some of them are even getting to the point now where they're, adopting that Hakuna Matata lifestyle.
One thing I would add to that as well, because I think that's a really good way of approaching things, is looking at kind of what's in your circle of control, like what can you control, and if you can't control it, what good is going to come from worrying about it. But I think a lot of it comes from kind of working on self-confidence as well, and this is something we've touched on that plays into the mental toughness, working on kind of self-esteem and feelings of self-worth, and your belief that you can handle whatever situation is going to be thrown at you or whatever you're going to have to encounter. That helps with the stress, because instead of thinking, oh God, this might happen and what if and how am I going to handle that situation, you have that self-belief that actually, okay, if that happens, it's fine, I can take it,
I'll just add something on to it as well, because I am someone who has lots of stress right now. But I guess I'm calming down. But generally speaking, I have been very much so in the past, very stressed person, very anxious person, and things like that. So I've had to find ways of dealing with that and managing with that. I think one of the best things I think the book is called The Worry Trick, and I can't remember the author's name, but effectively he talks about the fact that, whether it's anxiety or stress or a particular emotion, is accepting that feeling and almost acknowledging that feeling, and then kind of dealing with that feeling rather than trying to completely prevent it happening ever again, because we're all humans. At some point we are going to get stressed, we are going to get anxious about something. So try and not necessarily frame that as I should never feel like this. It's more like, okay, this is how I feel. Why do I feel like this, and what can I do about it? And I think that last element is how I kind of now think about things. And it might sound a little bit hippie and a little bit zen, but the way I kind of think about it is, if I feel anxiety, then I will kind of just stop what I'm doing for like 10 minutes or whatever, and then just kind of switch off, allow that feeling to, like, I feel that feeling here. And then I almost think about, well, what can I do right now that's going to make a difference to this situation? What positive action is going to be the next thing that I do once I start back up, whether it's working or whatever? What's the next thing that I'm going to do that is a positive step forward? And if it's something that I can control, then let's start taking that positive action. If it's something I can't control, then you just let the feeling go. And it sounds a bit hippie or zen or whatever, I don't know, but it was talked through quite well in that book. And that's certainly something that's helped me. So I kind of got to the point now where I no longer fear having an anxiety of any description. I acknowledge that as a normal human feeling, and then I deal with that and then kind of move on the best way I can. So I guess that's my own personal take. Whether that's a evidence-based take or not, I don't know, but it's my N=1.
Great.
There we go. Cool. Let's have another question. There's loads of coming in. You're scaring Dr. Mike, by the way, with your second trial run pandemic.
Sorry, mate.
This is not the main event. Okay, here we go. Is now a good time to set yourself crazy challenges like climbing the height of Mount Everest on your stairs? There you go. There's a question for you.
I mean, that's definitely something Jamie Alderton is doing right now, right?
In world record time.
Yeah.
I think one of my members did this today. I think she did scaffold pike on her stairs to pass time. I think that's what one of my coaches told me this before, and I was like, "What?" But she's crazy, so she probably did. It's one of them. Like it comes back down to, like, is this something that you are able to achieve, and will it benefit you? So you have to think, am I going to do this? Is it going to put me out of my comfort zone? Yes, that's when growth happens. But I would look at something like that and be like, I'm not going to do that. There's nothing in me that would think that I'm going to benefit from that psychologically. It wouldn't be a good challenge for me. So what you've got to do is kind of go full circle. Is that something that you, as an identity, that you think that would be useful to do. And if you've got time to do it, do you want to do it? To know. It doesn't interest me in the slightest. So I probably wouldn't do it. Therefore, it wouldn't be beneficial for myself.
I mean, now is a good time to do whatever you want to do. Like, a lot of people have more free time, and there's people all over social media bragging about all the things they're doing to improve themselves. But maybe doing nothing is the best thing for you to do to improve yourself. You don't have to actively, start studying something or take up a big challenge or, I don't know, teach yourself to bake or play a musical instrument or whatever. Like, you don't have to do anything with this time. Like, this is time that was unexpected. And if for you, the best thing to do is like chill out, then chill out. Like, binge some Netflix if that's what you really want to do with this time. Like, literally nobody can see what you're doing. You can do whatever the hell you want. Like, there's nobody there to watch you or tell you can't. So make the most of it, whatever it is you want to do.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, we've got a question that's coming in 3 parts. So there's no limit on the characters. You can go for a little bit longer. So what has each of you found to be the most successful form of support or coaching to help clients develop their mental toughness and resilience? So what has each one of you found to be the most successful form of support or coaching to help clients develop mental toughness and resilience? There we go.
Who wants to jump in first?
I can say a little something on this, and I'm sure everyone will want to chime in. So again, kind of reiterating what I said at the start is building mental toughness, as Ross has clearly identified, is that it's not just one thing. It's a plethora of different behaviors, habits, rituals that will make you to have this particular behavior, which is perceived as mental toughness. So I truly think like having confidence in kind of what you do by making things as simple as possible, and then gaining confidence within that because you've achieved it. So I'm gonna challenge myself to eat some lunch. I've done that. Great, I've eaten some lunch. Aren't I amazing? Whereas that might be like something ridiculously basic for somebody else who Nick, who's like, oh, I'm gonna have this particular amount of micronutrients with my lettuce and my sand that I'm having for lunch. So it'll be about the thing that I think has really helped me in terms of improving my mental toughness, which I don't believe I'm mentally tough anyway, but I'm good at some areas, is that I make things super, super simple for myself, and then I make sure that I definitely can do it. And Johnny said a lot about this yesterday when he gets his clients to do certain things, like, can you do this? Is this a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10? And if it isn't one of those two things, then you need to make something a little bit easier so that you can actually achieve it. And once you've achieved that small thing, that will improve your confidence, and it'll usually inspire you to do more. If you're getting someone to go, right, can you do 1 press up every day? Yeah, 100%. Of course I can do that. It's easy peasy. Okay, just do 1 press up every day. And then actually you'd be like, well, now I'm down here. Might as well do 5. And then this will then spiral more positive behaviors because you built the confidence in doing so. And if that is what you believe mental toughness to be, I would suggest starting there and trying to make things as simple and achievable as possible.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you talk about to help clients with developing their own mental toughness is to scale the task to their current level so that they can succeed at it, and then start working on progressing it from there. Like, rather than being like, right, 10 pull-ups, you might need to go, right, we're not even thinking about pull-ups, like, right, let's try 5 ring rows or something like that, like something that is more within their capabilities so that they're coming away feeling they've achieved something. And then you can start setting up progression from there. And by the time they can do those 10 pull-ups, they might have more mental toughness or more advanced mental toughness than someone who could have done them from the start, because they build themselves up and build like this foundation of, I can do this, I'm going to work on this, oh, now I've achieved it, I'm going to work on this, now I've achieved it, and working their way up. So just scaling whatever, like a task down to something that they can already do or something they could easily achieve with, minimal struggle, I think is definitely a key point for helping your clients with their own mental toughness.
I would also. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ross.
Oh, you go first.
You sure? Okay, thank you. I would say, yeah, small wins. Getting small wins quickly is like a really great thing with clients, because especially if they are new on to kind of training on nutrition and they're potentially particularly nervous about it as a starting point, like showing them that they're getting these wins quickly is a good way of building confidence. I'd also say with my clients, one of the things I think we'll probably try and do is empower them, and whether that's through giving them, helping them understand, kind of helping them choose their goal, understand why they want to achieve that, understand how they get there and what they need to think about in order to get there, and what actually they might be worrying about but they don't really need to worry about. I think kind of empowering them with knowledge can help them get that clarity with their goal and with what they're trying to achieve, without kind of being put off by, extra information and fears and anxiety that they're going to be thrown off. So I think, yeah, small wins, but then kind of giving them the confidence in what they're doing and the information you're providing them and like the path they've set out for themselves is a good way to go about it.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate here as well, because I also think that it's also the opposite of everything that we've just said. Like I completely endorse giving people confidence and instilling these behaviors in them, starting small and building them up. But also, like, I don't suggest that we should go full David Goggins on anyone, but he always talks about like creating calluses of the mind and making yourself do something incredibly uncomfortable every single day to build up that resiliency, to build up that I'm going to go and do something absolutely horrendous, even though I don't need to, because I want to make sure that I stay hard, which is kind of his tagline. And he's obviously a complete sociopath, but also quite entertaining. But his concept, and I think Jamie Alderton has taken a little bit of what Goggins does. I think Jamie Alderton, obviously his background is being in the army or Marines or something. Sorry if you're watching. But he does this thing where he gets into the sea first thing in the morning because he's like, this is awful. This is not going to be enjoyable, but I do it every day because it sets me up for the day, knowing that I can achieve greater things because my mind is now stronger. Whereas a lot of the time we like to stay comfortable. And I'll be the first person. I hate the sea and I hate cold showers. Like, honestly, I can't stand it. So I don't like being uncomfortable in that situation. I'm like, oh, it's cold. Why would I do that? I can just stay in the warm. So is that building my mental toughness, or should I just do it to help build my resiliency and become a better person, whilst also having small, sustainable, confident mini goals at the same time? So it's what do you do? Which way do you turn? How do you make somebody stronger? Do you make them feel really uncomfortable, or do you also reward them? Or is it a balance of the two?
Yeah, I think
segue. Sorry, Nick, that's an absolute perfect segue for my points. I suppose the first point is, I think as a coach, there's a fine balance to be tread between being empathetic and being firm. And I think this idea of being very firm as a coach when you need to be is something that a lot of coaches are a bit worried about, scared, because they almost feel like if I'm too firm with my client, they'll stop coming and they won't pay me. And, and listen, if a client breaks down and starts crying in sessions, if they have to leave for a moment and come back, like, that's not necessarily a bad outcome. That doesn't reflect on you. It's just that you've maybe had to tell them something in that moment that they weren't ready to hear, but they had to hear it. And especially in the realm that I currently work in, where there's a lot of physique transformations with clients, it's not an easy thing they're going through. And it is, you're going to have to challenge a lot of their current ways of perceiving and looking at things. So that unfortunately does come both with a bit of empathy, but also with being really firm and challenging things we need to. In particular, things like limiting beliefs. Many people are walking around with so many limiting beliefs as to why they can or can't do things. Most they can't do things. And often it's the case of actually just explaining through hypotheticals. So I like the exercise with clients where they use a lot of different language patterns, like complex equivalence, for example, where I can never ever seem to do this. And you kind of flip that on its head and say, right, well, so you're saying that you've never been able to, and you make it a bit more general than the specific task. You say, so you're telling me that you've never ever been able to be efficient. Oh no, well, at work I'm actually really efficient. I was like, so there's proof that you can be efficient. That's just a trait, that's a state. And that state can be transferred into any other form of life. You've just not learned the strategy how to do it yet. And so sometimes it's getting them to reframe how they see a particular action and say, right, well, if you're able to do it in another part of your life, you already have that. You have the trait. You just haven't applied it in this context yet. So I think being able to know the time when there's a limiting belief that's holding that client back and being able to really go challenge them firm on it and say, you realize that you believe this, but you're convincing yourself of a story which is not true. It's just a story you keep telling yourself. And if you actually rewrite the story, you'll actually be able to move forward and progress. And then I guess the third thing is when you've had those hard conversations and you've kind of met that balance between being firm and being empathetic, it's then putting it back on them and saying, right, well, tell me what if people are very good at telling you what they can't do. So I'll often say, right, well, if you're saying you can't do this, what can you do? Tell me what is a step you can make right now to start moving in the right direction, even if it's small. Just what can you do? And that gives them that independence back. Well, actually, I'm taking ownership of this situation. I'm empowering myself to make a decision to do something I know I can achieve. So I think that's quite important. Those three together are really useful as a coach. Like that balance between not being a drill sergeant, but also not being a coddler and just wrapping them up in cotton wool and, oh, please, please, please don't be upset. That's not useful either. Yeah,
I guess the skill is knowing how to approach each client in the way that they're going to be most receptive to. So, some, as you said, oh my God, Tim. Sorry. As you said, Tim, when you said some people, should you push yourself to being that uncomfortable? Well, it depends on the person. For some people, that's not going to be motivating for them. That's not going to push them to a place where they're like, yeah, And some people, depending on the personality, it might, So yeah, and with Ross, it's the same thing. It's finding that balance between and understanding your clients and their personalities enough to know how to approach things with them to get them the best outcome possible. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I would just clarify what I was saying because Tim, you raised a really good point. It's not about giving people just constantly giving them comfortable things and never getting them to progress. But I think like going into the C is something that they can do. So it is achievable. Like it is still an achievable goal, whether it makes them uncomfortable or not. I think in my example of using pull-ups, like if I was like, yeah, 10 pull-ups, off you go. It might make them uncomfortable, but they might not even finish a rep. Like the key with the thing that you're getting them to do, whether it makes them uncomfortable or not, is that they need to be able to achieve it. Especially in the early stages, like there might be something that you eventually want to progress towards. But in the early stages, like building up that mental toughness and resilience from nothing, especially if it's like a new skill or something like that, is to give them something that, yeah, it might push them, it might make them uncomfortable, but it's something that's achievable. Because as Dr. Mike, if he's still watching, will attest to, he hates going in the water, but when Jamie tells him to go in the water, he goes in the water. And that is probably building up Dr. Mike's mental toughness a little bit.
So maybe we can, if Dr. Mike is watching, maybe we can ask him, is he feeling mentally tougher after going into the sea? So Dr. Mike, if you're watching, can you give us some N=1 anecdotal advice? Are you becoming mentally tougher and more resilient every time Mr. Alderton forces you to go into the sea? So we'll wait for that one. Now, Nat comes in with a question. She says, something that gets me overwhelmed is when we go back to normal life, whatever that may be, and managing your time healthily, mentally, balancing work, play, and social time, as well as self-care. Do you guys have any thoughts on this? I'll leave that open to whoever wants to stick their hand up and answer it. No, we don't. No, go for it.
We lost the question. So I'm assuming, from what I understand from the question, they're kind of saying that at the moment they feel like they can balance those things, but their fear is that when life goes back to normal, that kind of balance will get thrown out of whack. I would say I approach this in a couple of ways. We don't really know yet when life is going to get back to normal, and I think kind of worrying about that, as we said before, in terms of like worrying about the things you can control, or like trying to combat the things that you can control. We don't know when life's going to get back to complete normal. It could, complete normal might be quite a while away. So trying not to kind of think that far forward, I would say actually if you're trying to understand your situation as it is and as it is for the next kind of coming weeks and coming months, and try and maintain that balance as best you can. And I think the more you've created that and established that in this environment, yes, and like, that's an amazing thing if you have kind of established that kind of balance between work, play and social time and self-care, like good job. And if you've done that now, then think about maintaining that and being proud of what you've achieved there. And then as time like draws closer that we are going to start going back to normal, then you can start thinking about how that happens. And also, it's not going to be a switch. It's not going to be like, cool, one day isolation, next day everything's normal again. I think that it's going to be a progressive thing, and you can grow with that. So I would say, try not to get overwhelmed by it. Be proud of what you've achieved and understand that if you've done this well so far, then have the confidence to believe that actually you will be able to kind of grow with it as times change. And yes, it's going to be tougher. You know, we all go back to work, or you have to kind of travel, and, you know, lots and lots of different things are happening. But if you can like really ground that balance now, then it's going to be easier to maintain.
Yeah, just wanted to add to that, Flo. I think ideal points. I think the thing we have to all realise is that, first of all, what has happened to all of this is we've had to create a new normal for ourselves. And I think also the reality is when we come out the other side of this, we're going to have to again create a new normal. And so going back to that whole idea of perspective and also limiting beliefs, there's very clear evidence if you've been able to create a new normal this time around, you can create a new normal the next time around as well. It's just that you have to accept that will very likely not look the same, or like you already know that's not going to look the same on the other side of this. But I also think it's worth thinking about that if you're trying to think about what normal is. First of all, I don't use the term of normal often, because I think normal is, what is normal? How do you define it? And I think that's ebbing and flowing all the time. Like, life is so variable and it changes all the time. So is there really truly a new normal? Well, there might be some things that are more consistent in life, but I think there's always variables that change. So I think it's just being flexible to the idea that you've created a new normal now. Just be ready and use those same behaviors to create a new normal when that time comes around again.
I think I'll add to that by saying that I think maybe when you're starting to change your habits and behaviors now, understand that I'm going to be more conscious about the fact that if I change something here because it fits this situation, know now that it might not be something you may be able to maintain. I think there will be things that you will create now that will be positive and you can carry on doing forever and a day. There'll be some things that you do specifically have to adapt to right now that will probably have to change, and kind of probably thinking about that and understanding that and accepting that now will help that transition become a little easier. And I think that maybe for someone, say like me, for example, my life hasn't changed a huge amount in terms of, I mean, this is not exactly normal, but sitting in front of a computer for long periods of the day is kind of what I do. So it's actually not hugely different. So the adjustment for me between new normal, old normal, and future normal is fairly easy to do. But I guess for other people, these transitions and the challenges are going to be more significant. So understand that as you're going about changing the things that you're doing, understanding that maybe this isn't a forever change, and then that might help it make it a smoother transition in the future.
I mean, everybody's changed from something they know to something they don't know. Well, not everyone, but most people have changed to something they don't know in this current situation. So to change back, you're going to be going to something that is very similar to something that you've done before. So it'll be something you know. So the transition you've made now, like say it's now your new normal already to, you know, be at home all day or be in social isolation or whatever it is, then transitioning back is not going to, well, is very unlikely to take longer than it's taken to transition here. It's especially because we're going back to something that for most people is something they've experienced before. It's not new, like this isolation thing. Like, unless you're very, very old, you've probably never been in a situation where you've been in social isolation. And that's just because they're in old age homes.
Question coming from Lynn. Serious question. What's going to get us up and motivated post? I think that's COFIT-19 rather than COVID-19. I don't know. me. So I'm not going to be the thing that's getting you up and motivated tomorrow. Trust me. So rely on awareness.
Lynn used to be one of my clients about 10 years ago when I used to live up in Darlington. So hello, if you recognise me. Look pretty much the same. As we all know, like, motivation wavers, right? Like, sometimes you might not be motivated to feed your kids. You might not be motivated to brush your teeth or have a shower, but you have to, because that's what you have to do. Yes, kids, legally, you kind of have to keep them alive. That's one of the important things about having kids. But I would just say you've got to commit to something, because there's so many times I want to be right open here right now, right? I have to get up early for work, right? And most mornings I get up and I'm like, I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to do it. But I commit to it. And then I'm always so glad that I actually have, because I love my job. I love seeing my members, and it's really, really important to me. But my instant thought when I wake up is, oh man, it is so amazing. And I don't feel motivated to get out of bed, but I commit to doing so because that's what I have to do. And in doing so, that creates, again, a snowballing effect of positivity and doing what I need to do. It's okay to not feel motivated at this time. Like, loads of people's jobs are at risk. People are stressed. There's all this uncertainty. And we get this anxiety that we are, oh, I'm not motivated, I'm a terrible person. No, like, it's totally fine. Like, we're going through these exceptional times that most of us have never faced before, as Nick's just said. Like, it's okay to be unmotivated, but you have to commit to something. And I would, again, as I've kind of been saying throughout this whole talk, commit to something small. Can I do 1,000 steps additional per day? Yes, absolutely. Okay, do that. And then can you do 1,500 steps per day? Okay, do that. Can you make it harder? Yes, do that. Write it down and commit to it. Motivation wavers, but commitment does not. You have to commit to yourself. You have to commit to bettering yourself. However that looks like for you, you have to do it. Because if you don't, you're either going to end up going backwards or you're going to be regretting it. And a question that I always try to pose to my clients and to my members is, would your future self be annoyed with the decision that you're making right now? So if you're like, oh, I don't want to get out of bed. Like, if I'm like, I don't want to get out of bed. In an hour's time, if I didn't get out of bed, I'd have no members. But also, my future self would look down on me and be like, what the hell are you playing at? Sort your life out. That's not okay behavior. So I asked myself, would my future self be happy with the decisions that I'm making? And if me sitting on my arse all day on the sofa doing nothing is going to annoy myself in the future, then I'm not going to do it, because my future self is going to tell me not to do that. Like, if I'm going to eat a whole cheesecake, a whole cheesecake, I love cheesecake, I'm going to eat the whole thing. Future Tim, will you be annoyed at yourself for eating a whole cheesecake and a pork pie? Oh, yes, you probably would. You probably don't need to do all that. Okay, my future self is telling me that I'm going to do it. And if people just stopped and kind of said this to themselves instead of eating it and going, I ate it all, I'm a disgrace, I'm a pig, I ate the whole thing, then actually, you know what I mean? Commit to something, do it. Ask yourself, would your future self be happy with the decisions and the behaviors that you're doing on that day? And try your best to change it. And it's okay to not be motivated.
Can I make a book recommendation, Simon? Sassy Tim. So I think you guys maybe read Simon Sinek's Start With Why.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Fantastic book. I think if anyone has ever struggled with an idea of finding a certain level of purpose, or kind of what is your unique ability or gift to present to the world and give to the world, then reading that book is a good place to start, because, you know, and like you rightly said, Tim, is kind of motivation is a very finite resource. It wanes. It's very situational, context driven. So we can't rely on it. It's not something we should look towards, neither necessarily as willpower. I think always thinking back to, right, well, okay, I might not have the, you know, whether it's the physical resources or the mental resources. And of course, there's times where you might have to change plan or change course. But if you start with why, you always remember, like, why am I doing this? But not on a superficial surface level, on a really deep level. Why do I really want to do this? That is, generally speaking, going to make you go, well, you know what? It's not the best day, or I'm not feeling as good as I did, say, last week for this workout, or, you know, whatever it is, or I've not got as much energy this week as I had, despite ticking all the boxes. Just understand that why is the thing that's going to drive you through. And And that's only assuming, though, that you've actually really clearly defined what it is. Because often a lot of people say, well, yeah, I know why I want to do something, but they don't truly know why. So I think take time to do the work. Read that book. Do the homework that it gives you in the book to do, the exercises and the tasks. Because often people read these books, these self-help books, and it's like, almost a lot of people have self-help books just to say, hey, look, I got this book. But then it's all fine and well taking in knowledge, but then how you go and apply it, that's ultimately where the magic is. So start with why.
Sorry, you go for it.
I would just kind of add to it, at the risk of sounding a little too softly. I agree with everything you guys are saying, but just to kind of give a kind of another side of it as well. I think understanding your why is a really good, like really useful thing for a lot of people, especially now, and kind of that belief that you need to kind of commit to something. But I think kind of just to make sure the mental toughness stuff isn't too much like just do it kind of thing. I think there is that kind of kindness that comes into it as well, and you have to, especially at this time. Yes, motivation is fickle. If you understand your why and form some habits and form some commitments, you are far more likely to keep yourself going throughout this period. But you also need to understand that this is a particularly difficult time, that actually your motivation might be lower than it has been before. And that's why your habits are so important. And also understand that actually right now, your why might change. So yes, you have goals that you want to achieve, but actually we're all in a completely new situation. And what might have become more important is kind of maintaining your mental well-being, or maintaining some normality with family at home and kids at home and stuff. So it's all going to change, and it's all in flux at the moment. So you have your kind of personal whys, but you have to also kind of build into that your well-being as a whole, kind of socially, mentally, everything like that, financially, everything. And that has to play into it even more now than it did before. So I would just to build that in.
Sure. Cool. And I just wanted to add in this question here because we just touched on it right now from Harrison. So self-help books, do you guys think they are effective, or is it down to how the reader interprets the information and the perspective the writer's coming from? I guess that my personal take, before maybe someone wants to kind of chip in, is that self-help books can be good. I think that it all comes down to what do you do with that information? Because you can read all the books that you like. If you don't put any of it into practice, it was all pointless, regardless of how good those concepts were. So don't just read books for the sake of reading books. I think I would always challenge yourself to, I always, when I listen to an audiobook, have a notes app open on my phone, and I'm making notes as I go, or I'm underlining stuff in a book so that I'm coming back to that. I'm actually taking that concept and saying, how can I actually apply that? Often for me, in a context of social media or coaching and things like that, I always try to relate it. So can I take this piece of information that I've learned here and apply it straight away? Can I teach it in a fitness concept or a way that helps my clients to help me solidify what I've just learned, but also help others and things like that? So I think that they're good if you use them, pointless if you just read it for reading's sake, unless that's what you were intending to do with it. Yeah. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, so I completely agree with what Simon said. To be honest, Simon says, "Hey, I really agree with what he said." I've actually read quite a few self-help books. I used to be a bit embarrassed about saying that I read them, but it was good to understand the psychology behind them. But there's one book in particular that has wholeheartedly changed my life, and it's a really simple concept, and it's a book by a female psychologist called Byron Katie, and it's called Loving What Is. And it's a really interesting concept that Ross talked about quite a lot, about self-identity. And you just basically you ask yourself these 4 questions, and you basically have to swallow the bitter pill, because the first question is it true? And the next question would be, can you categorically say 100% that what you're thinking is true, or what that situation is true? If you think no. So it's really kind of made me understand myself, because I now truly believe that there's nothing that anyone could tell me that I didn't already know. So if Nick was like, Tim, you've got a stupid heart, you think you're a 14-year-old kid, you can't grow facial hair, and you've got a rubbish jawline, I'd be like, is that true? Yeah, he's probably right, actually. It makes sense. So I'm not upset by what that person said or the situation that he's created, because I can reflect on myself and go, well, actually, yeah. Or you were really rude then. Okay, well, let's replay that situation. Is that true? No, I don't think I was rude. Is there 100% chance with certainty that you know that you were not rude? Actually, maybe I could have. And it basically just teaches you to internalize and reflect your own behaviors, so you can be honest and swallow a bit of pill, even though you've been a bit of a prick. You can go, yeah, I understand where that person's coming from, and they might just be doing it from their perspective, but actually it's true. And that really, 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 really helped me kind of understand and not get upset by things, because I can just internalize it and go, that person probably has a point. I don't like it, but it might be true.
I think one thing I would say is I think they can be really helpful if you put them into practice. I think the one thing that they lack is that they're not necessarily totally specific to you and what you're trying to combat and the things you're struggling with, and all of those things are going to be so person dependent. So yeah, they might give you kind of like a really good kind of foundation, but if there are specific issues that you feel like you are struggling on a continued basis, then it might be worth getting some more kind of personalized help with that, because you can do both,
Cool. Right, next question then. We have from Facebook user, who is, assuming not called Facebook user. Let's see if we can find a name. Nope, can't find it. I have a very stress/worry-free mentality. What tips do you have to encourage or help someone who isn't adapting to this new normal, who's gone into a hole of depression with this current, I guess that might be completely out of our scope, to be fair. I'm not sure if we want to touch depression because we're not really in our realm, I suppose. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think if you feel like they are struggling with depression, then trying to offer them, get them to seek professional help with that is the best way to go about it. Or because kind of out of our scope of practice with that stuff.
Yeah, I think with what is within our scope, though, is like you just said, Flo, is just to recommend that they get a support network around them, because often when people are feeling this sort of way, from my experience, it's because they're not communicating with other people. They've usually one of the key signs of depression is that someone is very insular and they've stopped communicating how they're feeling. So I think if you are one of those people, just get a support network around you, whether that's family, friends, and or, like Flo said, seeking that professional help, because it's a very complex condition to deal with.
And there's free resources in the UK certainly to help with that as well. So certainly I would kind of explore those and maybe look at those different avenues as well. Cool. What's the book? I missed it. I'm assuming that was the Sinek one, or was it one that Tim referred to? Just in case it was the one Tim referred to, what was that one again, mate?
It was called Loving What Is, by a psychologist called Byron Katie.
There we go. Perfect. Cool. Right. Kind of lost where we are in the whole kind of grand scheme of things, really. We kind of went into a lot of the live questions. So if anyone's got more questions around that, we can kind of still touch on those. We had some kind of pre-prepared stuff. So I don't know if we want to go back through this. Is there anything we haven't touched on already? So we were going to talk about how self-image impacts mental toughness. I don't know if we've covered that. We want to say any more on that.
Yeah, so I think we've touched on it slightly in terms of self-confidence being quite an important aspect of what you would call mental toughness, and kind of the idea of your self-identity can often be what you perceive your self-identity to be a limiting factor. So I think it does play into it massively, and I think also in our current environment, and society when everything's on social media, and you know, all of us with our Instagram tags on our things. And I think that like that kind of world of social media can lead to a lot of comparison. And something I have seen, even working with clients recently, is people being like, "Oh God, there's so much information out there. It seems like everyone's doing everything at the moment." As you said, people posting about all the things they've achieved during lockdown and and that's great. And it doesn't mean that they shouldn't, but I think it's about being able to not necessarily not internalize that and suddenly be like, "Oh my God, I'm the only one who doesn't seem to be achieving all of these things." And so I think kind of creating a strong self-image, strong self-confidence, and strong self-identity that's linked to values, strong values, will ultimately help you with your resilience and your mental toughness long term. But that incorporates so many other things that are probably a little bit out of our scope of practice in terms of kind of anxiety and could even be depression. Like there's a lot of like mental well-being stuff that plays into it. So I think that if people are struggling with it, it can be a really great place to start to work on your self-image before you start thinking, how can I just now be tough? Because it's not always about being tough. Sometimes it's about being kind to yourself so that you can be tough.
Yeah, I can add to that, Flo. There's a lot of really good stuff. Always giving me great stuff to lead off of. I think, exactly like you said, I think the way I like to define things to people when it comes to, I like to refer to them as states. You have certain states of being depending on the context or situation. So, for example, it's quite a resourceful state that if you were to step out into the street and by God, there was maybe like in The Hangover movie, there was a tiger right there. A very resourceful state at that point in time is, I've got fear, I'm scared, I need to either fight, flight, flee, whatever your response is going to be. And obviously, sometimes you don't know how you're going to react until you get in those situations. That's a very extreme example, but there's a time where it's going to be resourceful to be like that. But then there's going to be a time where it's not resourceful. So say you're trying to go to bed at night and you're scared and you're panicking, worrying about all these things. That's not a resourceful time for that state to be present. And it's just like, for example, going into a training session, it's very resourceful at that point in time to be hyped up and ready to go smash the iron. But it's not very resourceful to have that sort of state going into other situations. I think sometimes looking at, rather than saying that, well, I shouldn't feel anxious or I shouldn't feel that you shouldn't feel a certain way, think of it more as, well, is this a resourceful state for the situation that I'm in right at this moment? And if you start to look at the kind of states that you're in like that, it can really, really help with doing what they kind of call an NLP language, a state transfer, where you can kind of go, well, this isn't resourceful for me right now, so I'm going to change it and work towards having a more resourceful state for this situation.
Cool. Awesome. And another one, again, I don't know if we kind of cover in completeness. I'll throw it over to Nick to maybe add anything that he wants to that we haven't covered already. How would we maybe help someone who is struggling with mental toughness to a degree?
Yeah, so we did cover some stuff. There's a few other things worth looking at is if maybe it's, because this is obviously, the name of this talk is for a fitness goal. So if this is in like a team sport, for example, you have not just the individual mental toughness, but there's also a collective mental toughness. So we've all seen those various sports teams that just can't seem to put a win together. And we've also all seen those sports teams who always seem to pull it out of the bag. And there's something to be said for that confidence that they have or that lack of confidence that they have. So if you've got one particular player, maybe who, let's use rugby for an example, just when they make the step up to whatever the next level is, just always seems to fumble, but is like a real star of their own team. There's some sort of confidence issue there. And maybe looking at that collective mental toughness could be something that would be helpful. So, for example, if it was someone who was struggling to make it in the first team, you could drop them down to the second team and maybe they become the star of the second team and then they get that confidence and then eventually make it up to the first team or something similar to that. There's also, I've written down normalizing empathy. So we spoke about it a little bit, making it okay thing to talk about. Like if somebody is struggling with their mental toughness, and normalizing those conversations and the language around that. So like if someone comes to you and they're like, man, I'm really struggling today. If your response is, harden up, that's probably not going to help the situation. It's probably going to, in fact, exacerbate the situation. I think harden up is one of those terms where it's probably not really appropriate in many situations anymore, unless you're waiting for concrete to dry, you're boiling an egg, or you're struggling with some sexual issues. Harden up is probably has no real place when you're talking to people anymore. There's much better ways you can go about that, and showing some empathy and maybe discussing stuff with them, but having that culture where empathy and those conversations are okay to have is definitely something that can make a difference. Because if somebody is struggling with something and then they manage to get it out, and let's say I'm talking to Ross and I'm like, yeah, Ross, I'm really struggling with my confidence in this talk because I don't know if I know as much as you. And Ross is like, I'm pretty sure you know as much as me. I've seen you talking a bunch of stuff. You're really knowledgeable, blah, blah, blah. Then rather than him just being like, oh, get over it, he's might have just that little conversation, that approachability, that normalization of having those conversations has suddenly got my confidence up. And then I come into it and I'm like, oh, doing what I'm doing now, talking too much. Instead of, I could have just sat back and not said anything. So I think normalizing the language and the empathy and the situations that people can get themselves into is pretty important. I know that they're all very team sport specific, or at least group specific, but that's my background. So that's kind of my insight into ways to help people. But I'm sure Tim, he's put his name down for this question as well. So he's going to probably expand on everything I've just said and make it better.
You said that, and I've literally just closed the tab as you were talking. And I was like, well, he's nailed that one. But yeah, I completely agree. And I think it's about having those honest conversations and normalizing we think we found really hard, especially like the older generation, and I'm not trying to stereotype, is that we find it really hard to admit when we are struggling or when we're feeling that we're upset or whatever it might be, when actually everyone is feeling that. And one of the kind of similar to what Nick said about manning up or not knowing as much, and just right by Ross going, oh yeah, like you've done all right. Oh right, okay. But what a conversation I have quite frequently with all my members is that everyone is like having a terrible time. Everyone is actually, contradictory to what we've said earlier, it has less time than they ever be. But most of my demographic are young mums with kids. They have less time than they ever had. They're more stressed. They're homeschooling their kids. They're trying to work a job. They're really, really stressed, and they're like, I haven't got anything to go down. This is terrible. But everybody else is doing amazing, and I'm like, you're not. No, everyone's having a terrible time. It's okay. Oh, really? Yeah, I've spoken to like 5 people already this morning, and they're all bursting into tears, and they're having a really tough time. Like, it's not just you. Like, it's okay. You're doing really well. Oh, okay. Oh, well, that makes me feel better. And instead of going, oh yeah, you're doing a terrible job, you should probably just man up. That would just completely not help the situation. But normalizing these conversations of struggle and going, yeah, I'm finding it really hard as well. Yeah, I'm a little bit nervous. Yeah, I'm a little bit apprehensive, and having the ability to go, yeah, so am I. It's okay, but you're doing a good job. And I think normalizing those difficult conversations are incredibly important to make everyone just a little bit better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
I think just to expand on that a little bit more, then maybe springing this question is that does the concept of man up cause more harm than good when seeking to find self-toughness or try to spark it in others?
You can't say more.
Super quick.
There you go, Nats.
Yeah, it's just super short. It's just that, I from a rugby background, was my original sport as well, so I completely understand it. It's just chucked around like it's no one's business. And I think essentially when someone says to you, man up, for depending on who you are as a person, that's essentially saying to you, I'm not willing to or interested in listening to how you're feeling right now. If you say that to someone, that's pretty much what you're telling someone, and that's not a very helpful narrative to have. So I think certainly within, sports teams and within physical sports, and I think just to be honest, just a societal thing. Vulnerability should not be seen as a weakness; it should be seen as a strength. Because if you're able to be really, really vulnerable in situations that allow yourself to be open to being criticized, to exploring the full spectrum of your emotions, then it means that when you're in a position of strength, you're going to be able to really lean into that way more, I think.
Yeah. It doesn't offer much, unfortunately. It just we
would lose. We lost Tim.
That was awesome. Oh,
we're losing everybody.
Wow.
Hello.
Major malfunction.
We still don't have Tim back, but I'll go from here. Like language, as I've already kind of touched on, is super important. So like a common thing in a lot of sports is to call someone a pussy, for example, which I think like the way you perceive that is, going to definitely, thanks, Peter. The way you perceive that is definitely going to have a lot to do with how it affects you. So like, for example, if you take it literally, then is it really an insult? Like, think of all the things that part of the anatomy can do. I personally think it would be more of an insult to be called like a ball bag because, they're soft, they can't really take any damage, they're really sensitive. So, language, not just on the rugby pitch, like everywhere, maybe think about words before they come out of your mouth. I know a lot of people struggle with that, whether it's man up or calling someone a pussy or eat some cement or whatever the normal things that go around. It can really affect people. And usually the people who are affected by it most are the people who are already struggling with it. So, just something to really think about.
I guess like it comes down to as well, like a lot of these phrases is when someone says it, it's a bit like when someone tells you just calm down. No one ever has instantly calmed down from that. So man up. How many people just instantly responded to that in a massively positive way and completely changed how they were feeling and stuff like that. So I think when you think about when people say this, it doesn't help in any way, shape, or form, and I think it probably just does more harm than good. I would say to probably maybe answer that question. It's funny, like people watching live can't see what I guess you guys can see as well. Who's backstage, as it's called, this little piece of software that we're using, and she's laughing now because Charlotte is literally lying in bed waiting to join the live. Which is it's very interesting. I'm really tempted just to press the button now, just to really
100% do it.
Yeah.
But there we go. So I'll spare her blushes for now. But shall I?
Yeah. Bring her in.
There she is.
Hello.
Hello.
It's late, Simon. People have bedtimes.
I know, Charlotte, and I know people have bedtimes. Also, people have like dinner times, and lunchtime. I've missed all of those. So there we go. I'll let you.
22 past midnight in Dubai. So there you go.
Oh, that's late.
I'll let you have 7 minutes of kip, Charlotte, and I'll bring you back. So there we go. Cool. Another question coming in. To build mental toughness, would disassociating yourself from negative experiences, places, venues improve your well-being confidence? What a cryptic question.
I'll jump in if you guys don't mind. That's really hard to answer. Really hard to answer because it's not context.
Is everyone else getting an echo?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
It's really hard to answer because obviously you don't know the exact context. I think disassociating yourself from negative experiences, I would say from my experience, and this is literally just very personal, would be that actually I find owning negative experiences has been more useful for me. And so one, I mentioned in the other talk, I used to be a dancer. I got injured, and I had to go through the process of injury and stop and kind of stop dancing and not pursue my dance career anymore. And that was an incredibly tough experience for me, a very negative experience. at the time, and it was kind of a very tough thing to deal with. But the more I have kind of looked back on it and owned it, and owned what happened, and kind of come to terms with it, the better I've felt. So it's difficult, because if there's specific negative experiences that are kind of making you feel unsafe, or then yes, maybe disassociating yourself from it is good. But in my experience, from the experiences I've had, I found that being able to kind of own that and understand it and kind of confront it has helped me. But yeah, without lots of context, I wouldn't know for sure.
Yeah, and I think that from this one, I guess it depends what you're trying to be mentally tough with. So if it's something like diet and nutrition and things like that, I know that in the MNU live talk, Stefan Guillenet talked about, visual cues and smells and things like that. Seeing your favorite restaurant, walking past your favorite restaurant, smelling those smells can be quite a powerful thing that can trigger cravings and can trigger you to want to eat those foods and go, and if it maybe not necessarily fits with what you're trying to achieve right now. So maybe making sure, or kind of not saying it's necessarily good or bad or whatever, but saying that maybe for right now, you maybe adjust how you live your life, adjust the behavior to be more in keeping with what you're trying to achieve, knowing that it's not necessarily bad to go and eat that restaurant or whatever. But, or maybe if it's a nutrition thing you're trying to become mentally tough with, maybe think about it from that side of things.
That's a good point, Simon, because there's such a thing known as nostalgic triggers. I don't know if you guys have heard the term as well of ACEs, so adverse childhood events. But a lot of people can have certain behaviors or triggers based on things that they experienced way, way, way before the point that they're currently in. And so that can be quite powerful in terms of how it controls people. So I think if it's nostalgic triggers, sometimes people aren't even aware of them, but if it's something like an adverse childhood event, I know that can be something that's incredibly limiting and holding people back. So I know that that's something you need to go and see a specialist for. Because I've had a couple of clients that have had that where they've opened up and said, I was sexually abused when I was 4 years old, when I was 7 years old. And, it's way beyond our scope of practice to even dive into any of that other than just listening. And you're maybe the first person that ever vented that to. And the only thing you can do at that stage is listen, I hear you. I'm really sorry that you had to go through that, but I recommend that you go and work with someone who really is great at pulling this out and helping you to resolve any kind of lagging issues that you're carrying with you as a burden at this point. But that's really, I think, all we can do with regards to that stuff.
Sorry, I was kicked off for some reason. I'm just going to... I actually did my dissertation on coping methods. And what I tried to look into was if you can... Sorry, just to completely just chime in, by the way. I was like, I was backstage, like, I know this one. Why would Simon let me in? And I basically wanted to look at different types of coping, because coping mechanisms are far easier to teach rather than the plethora of mental toughness. Okay, and what we basically found is, and what the research quite strongly suggests, is that avoidance coping mechanisms are the worst type of coping that you can do in order to reduce stress and improve mental toughness. So if you disassociate, and by disassociate, I'm kind of very similar to avoiding situations is probably the worst thing that you can do. And the research quite strongly suggests that the approach coping method, which is pretty much exactly what Flo said, by approaching something kind of face on and fronting things, is by far the best way to cope with stressful situations, but also to improve your ability to be mental tough, mental fortitude, hardiness, resiliency, all these different terms that the research talks about. So fronting your problems, approaching any kind of things that are hard is the best way to reduce stress in the long term. Acutely, it very much depends on the person. That we know people who can just avoid things and do the whole it called? There's the ostrich. Ostrich put their head in the sand. They do that, but they're stupid birds, aren't they? And they can't even fly. So, you know what I mean?
Shitbirds.
Shirts.
Cool. Right.
So yeah,
we're going to bring in Charlotte now, and we're going to have to say goodbye, I think, to Tim, because we can only have 6 people on. Otherwise, I would kind of keep you on.
That's fine. I need to go back.
Goodbye to. So thank you, Tim. Thank you for your time, by the way. Follow him on Instagram.
Thank you very much.
Tim_ETC.
Thank you, Sam, for organising such an amazing event. It's been amazing, genuinely, to sit and watch. I've learned an awful lot just by how you've organised everything, how you've conducted yourself, the hours that you put in. The organisation behind the scenes is truly admirable. I think you've done an amazing job. So I really hope that you kind of reflect upon this and go, "That's awesome."
Not doing that again.
And the best reflection. And the best thing is, I spoke to Big Nick more than I've ever spoken to him in any time. So it's amazing. So
thanks,
good. Flo, you need a fit. Flo, can you fist me? You got to. The other way. Boom.
That escalated quickly.
Flo, can you fist me?
Peace and love. Cheers, guys. Take care.
See you later.
Cool. And we've got to say goodbye to Big Nick as well. I'm afraid we only got room.
Good, guys.
So appreciate it, Nick. You've been 6 talks plus a billion Q&As. Almost as long as I have. Appreciate you coming on, my friend, and giving lots of time and also knowledge along the way. So I'm sure everyone in the comments appreciates your time and your efforts, buddy. So take it easy. Enjoy. I know it's late over there in Munich. So have a good evening and a good sleep and a good feed.
Thanks very much, Si. See you guys later. Bye.
Cheers,
Bye.